The idea of a unicorn startup has become one of the most seductive myths of the modern business world. $1 billion valuation, global headlines, founders turned icons overnight. From the outside, the journey looks like a straight line powered by vision, brilliance, and perfect timing. But when you read the books, case studies, and founder reflections that actually document how unicorns are built, a very different story emerges. Unicorn status is not the result of extraordinary speed. It is the result of surviving complexity long enough for scale to take hold. Most unicorns do not begin with the intention of becoming unicorns. They begin with a narrow problem that feels personal, painful, and stubbornly unsolved. Books that dissect companies like Airbnb, Stripe, and Uber consistently emphasize this point. The founders were not chasing valuation milestones. They were obsessed with fixing something broken. The billion-dollar outcome was not the goal, it was the consequence of solving a problem at a scale large enough to matter. One of the first realities the books dismantle is the belief that unicorns are built on brilliant ideas alone. Ideas are cheap. Execution under uncertainty is not. What separates billion-dollar startups from thousands of failed ones is not originality, but endurance. Unicorns survive repeated moments where logic says they should quit. Early traction is misleading. Growth stalls. Investors say no. Products break under load. Teams fracture. The books show that what looks like inevitability in hindsight felt like fragility for most of the journey. Another uncomfortable truth emerges quickly. Unicorns are built in tension, between speed and stability, between vision and feedback, between founder control and institutional discipline. Startups that fail often choose one side too early. They either move fast without structure or build structure before momentum exists. Unicorns learn to hold both. They move quickly while laying foundations they hope they will not need, but will. A recurring pattern in unicorn stories is the obsession with scale from day one, not in size, but in architecture. Billion-dollar startups are not those that grow first, but those that can grow when the moment arrives. Books on hypergrowth emphasize that scalability is designed long before it is tested. Systems, culture, and incentives are quietly shaped for a future that does not yet exist. This foresight often looks unnecessary until suddenly it is not. Market selection also plays a decisive role. Unicorns almost always operate in markets that are large, expanding, or undergoing structural change. But size alone is not enough. The books reveal that timing matters more than vision. Too early, and the market resists adoption. Too late, and incumbents crush differentiation. Unicorn founders often describe feeling slightly uncomfortable early enough to struggle, late enough to matter. This narrow window is rarely obvious in real time. Another theme that appears across unicorn literature is the founder's evolving role. Early on, founders do everything. Later, they must let go of almost everything. Billion-dollar companies are not built by founders who cling to control. They are built by founders who can replace themselves in every function except vision. This transition is psychologically brutal. Many promising startups stall here. The books are clear. Scaling a company requires scaling the founder's identity first. Capital, of course, plays a role, but not in the way most people assume. Unicorns do not win because they raise money. They raise money because they are winning. Books repeatedly warn that capital amplifies whatever already exists. It accelerates clarity or chaos. Startups that raise aggressively without operational maturity often collapse under their own weight. The unicorn path demands discipline before dollars, not the other way around. Culture emerges as one of the least visible but most decisive factors. In the early stages, culture feels informal. But unicorns institutionalize values early, often before they fully understand them. Books show that culture in hypergrowth companies is not about perks or slogans, it is about decision-making defaults. What happens when information is incomplete? When speed conflicts with quality? When ethics conflicts with profit? The answers to these questions shape outcomes more than strategy decks ever could. Another subtle pattern appears around customer obsession. Unicorns do not just acquire users, they earn irrational loyalty. This loyalty is not driven by marketing alone, but by products that integrate deeply into daily life or critical workflows. The books emphasize that unicorn-level scale is rarely achieved through mild preference. It requires becoming hard to replace. Convenience turns into dependency. Value turns into habit. As companies approach massive scale, complexity multiplies, coordination slows, communication fractures, execution risk rises. The books reveal that many unicorns nearly die at this stage, not from competition, but from internal overload. Systems that worked for hundreds break at thousands. Processes designed for thousands fail at millions. The ability to redesign the company while it is running becomes a defining skill. This is where professional management, governance, and long-term thinking matter most. One of the most misunderstood aspects of unicorn success is resilience to public scrutiny. At scale, mistakes are amplified, trust is tested, regulatory attention intensifies. The books show that unicorns survive not by avoiding mistakes, but by responding to them with transparency and adaptation. Reputation becomes as valuable as product, and reputation, once damaged, slows growth more effectively than any competitor. As these patterns layer together, the unicorn narrative becomes less romantic and more human. Billion-dollar startups are not built by flawless execution, but by continuous correction. Not by certainty, but by learning faster than the problems accumulate. The road is not straight. It loops, stalls, and occasionally collapses, only to be rebuilt stronger. And this is where the story begins to sharpen. Because once you understand that unicorn status is not a destination but a byproduct of scale, resilience, and alignment, the question changes. It is no longer how do we become a unicorn, but are we building something that can survive becoming one? It is at this moment where ambition collides with responsibility that the true test of a billion-dollar startup begins, revealing whether growth will amplify value or magnify weakness, and whether the company can evolve fast enough to carry the weight of its own success, moving forward cautiously yet relentlessly, like a suspension bridge being extended plank by plank across a canyon, each piece tested before the next is placed. And this is where the road to unicorn status reaches its most revealing stage, not in growth itself, but in what growth exposes. In the second half of every true unicorn story, scale stops being a reward and becomes a stress test. Everything that was once hidden is amplified. Weak communication turns into organizational confusion. Ambiguous values turn into public controversy. Small inefficiencies turn into massive costs. Books that chronicle billion-dollar startups are clear on this point. Becoming a unicorn does not fix problems, it multiplies them. The companies that endure are those that anticipated this multiplication and prepared for it long before the valuation arrived. One of the most critical shifts at this stage is governance. Early startups thrive on speed and intuition. Unicorns require process and accountability. This transition is where many founders struggle most. It feels like a loss of freedom, a dilution of the original spirit. But the books show that governance is not bureaucracy, it is memory. It preserves decisions, values, and priorities as the organization grows too large for personal oversight. Without it, chaos scales faster than innovation. Another defining challenge is strategic restraint. At billion-dollar valuations, opportunity explodes, new markets beckon, adjacent products seem obvious, partnerships multiply. The temptation to do everything at once is enormous. Yet the books repeatedly show that unicorns die not from lack of opportunity, but from overextension. The companies that survive learn to say no even when they finally can say yes. Focus, at scale, becomes a defensive strategy. Talent dynamics also change dramatically. Early employees are generalists, bonded by proximity and mission. Later stage organizations require specialists, managers, and leaders who were not part of the original story. This creates cultural tension. The books describe this phase as emotionally complex. Loyalty versus competence. History versus necessity. Unicorns that succeed navigate this transition with honesty. They honor early contributors without freezing the company in its past. They recognize that scaling the company means evolving the team. As public visibility increases, narrative control becomes another hidden battleground. Unicorns are no longer just companies. They are symbols. Media scrutiny intensifies. Regulators watch closely. Public opinion shifts quickly. Books emphasize that at this stage, communication is strategy. Silence creates suspicion. Overconfidence invites backlash. The companies that survive develop a disciplined voice, transparent, measured, and consistent. Reputation becomes an asset that must be actively managed, not passively enjoyed. Another lesson that surfaces here is the difference between valuation and value. Unicorn status is a financial milestone, not an operational one. It does not guarantee profitability, resilience, or longevity. The books warn against confusing investor confidence with market validation. Sustainable unicorns eventually align valuation with fundamentals, unit economics, customer retention, real impact. Those that do not are exposed when conditions tighten. Reality always arrives. Eventually. Perhaps the most profound insight from this stage is how success reshapes the founder. Leading a billion-dollar organization requires emotional maturity as much as strategic skill. Ego must be managed. Identity must detach from control. The books describe founders who either grow into this role or are replaced by it. The ability to remain curious, humble, and adaptable determines whether the company continues to evolve or becomes rigid under its own weight. And then there is the long view. The rarest unicorns are those that remain relevant a decade later. These companies understand that disruption is cyclical. Today's advantage becomes tomorrow's assumption. Books that follow unicorns across generations show that longevity comes from reinvention, not dominance. The best companies cannibalize themselves before competitors do. They treat success as temporary and learning as permanent. This is the quiet conclusion the books arrive at. Unicorn status is not the finish line. It is a checkpoint, a moment where ambition must be recalibrated, structures must mature, and responsibility must expand. The true achievement is not reaching a billion-dollar valuation, but building an organization capable of justifying it over time. If this story resonated with you, reflect on one question. If your startup succeeded beyond your expectations tomorrow, what would break first? That answer reveals what you need to build today. Share that thought. And if you want to continue exploring how enduring companies are shaped beneath the surface, beyond headlines and hype, stay connected. Subscribe, follow, and return. Because the most impressive startups are not those that become unicorns, but those that survive being one.